Before World War II, just 13% of Americans lived in the suburbs. By the year 2000, half the US population lived in suburban cities. Suburbs, being invented in the 1950s, have revolutionized the way people live. However, although suburbs sound great on paper, research suggests that living in an unnatural, cookie cutter neighborhood may be detrimental to mental health. I personally have lived in a suburb called Weston for all my life, and now that I go to a university with many international students, the question comes into mind. How does growing up in a suburb versus a city affect your state of mind? For this documentary, I knew I needed an expert in the field. I started to look for sociology professors who will be knowledgeable on the subject and came across one in my own university, Nova Southeastern. I began chatting with Professor Kavanagh, and he quickly replied, saying that he was interested in this topic and he also knew about the suburb Weston. So I was fast to set a date and time and made my way over to him.
My name is Mark Kavanagh. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Conflict Resolution, and I teach sociology courses here at Nova Southeastern.
Well, where I'm from, I live in Weston, here in Broward County, which is actually a very popular suburb. There was a news article that said it was like top 10 safest cities like in the United States. But what's different about Weston, or what's similar between other suburbs, is that it's like a cookie cutter plastic town. Like, it's all similar, it's always the same thing. Unlike a city where there's always something going on, you go outside and it's always changing, there's always something to see. In a suburb, it's like always the same thing. So my question to you is, like, how does it affect like the critical years of childhood health? Just seeing the same thing and just being in a perfect town where you don't need to like worry about anything.
Well, first of all, it's a truly great question. And I possibly have a very long answer to that.
It's no problem.
I think if you look at the history of cities, I used to teach a course here on urban sociology, that go back to the Bronze Age, to the Roman times. Cities have, Periclean Athens 2,500 years ago, cities have always been the cauldron, for lack of a better word, of ideas. They attract people from the rural areas who come in, and the intermingling of the different types of people,
Mix of ideas,
causes different ideas and different solutions to problems. Let's talk about two ancient cities. First of all, Periclean Athens, which of course is the birthplace of democracy. But in Periclean Athens, sort of the golden age of Athens, the people began to rule. And today, across from the Acropolis in Greece, in Athens, you can see a place where the people assembled. There's still steps that are cut into there's like bleacher seats cut into the mountain, and the entire population of Athens used to go up there, and issues would be presented to them, and they would vote using black or white stones that they obtained from the seacoast, and which are in abundance to this day. And they would put a black stone in one urn and a white stone in another, and then these were tipped over and the stones counted, and that's how votes were tallied.
and also in a city, there's usually a lot of public transportation, like subways. Not as much people have cars, so it's also like less privatized. Unlike in a suburb where it's more isolated, everyone goes in their own car, like go eats by themselves, just does everything by themselves or with their own friends and with their own families. More like kind of cliquier compared to a city. Versus in a city, you can go on a subway and talk to whoever you want, and it's just way more open.
This is another great question. And that's because, again, what we see is the infrastructure of the city affects the quality of social relationships that they have. Certainly the diversity of people that they're exposed to. But the fact that it hasn't been there, and again, the fact that it can get so hot here for so long in the year, does isolate people. As you say, people move out of their air-conditioned house, they get to their air-conditioned car, and they go to the air-conditioned super mall, without really interacting with anybody. And this is not necessarily the case as you quite rightly suggest, in a city like, say, New York, where you ride the subway, you see all kinds of different people, and you develop a tolerance for all those people. How interesting are all these different people going about their adventure during the day? So I take your point that cities do present, again, an awful lot of opportunities for people that Paradoxically, we think that the suburbs make difficult. I mean, people tend to move to the suburbs for an easier life. They don't have all the hustle and bustle of the city. But on the other hand, there's a trade-off, and the trade-off is that you don't get so exposed to different ideas and different types of people and different cultural artifacts and practices that you might otherwise.
Professor Kavanagh taught us some very interesting things about the history of cities and how its infrastructure affects its citizens. But now I want more anecdotal remarks of living in a city versus a suburb, and one of my childhood friends, Pedro, was a perfect match, so I made my way over to him in the city of New York.
All right, I'm Pedro Damasino. I am 18 years old. I go to Columbia University in the city of New York. I was born in Rio, and I lived a long time in Florida, in between Weston and Fort Lauderdale.
So you feel that those 3 years you spent in Paris like matured you faster than those 5 or 6 years you spent in Weston?
Absolutely, without a doubt. There's not a single doubt in my mind that those 3 years were my years of maturing. The other part of it, of course, was my autonomy, my physical autonomy, being able to go out by myself without having to worry about transportation, without having to worry about getting places and reliable ways of getting places. It's always there. I can always take the metro and go visit my friend on the other side of the city. It was very easy. From 12 to 13 years old, I was traveling the city by myself. And I guess the freedom that I started to have in Paris when I moved there wasn't just going out freedom. It was more of a thought freedom in that I wasn't really boxed in to think a certain way because I had a lot more things being exposed to me. There was cultural influence that started shaping the way I thought, and there was history that started shaping the way I thought, and the way that people function within a city started to shape the way I thought. When I lived in a suburb, it was very, very concentrated and closed in what I was being taught and what I was learning. The only thing that I was learning was A, what my parents were telling me, B, what my direct front door neighbor was telling me when we'd go play outside, and C, what I was learning in school.
So all in all, we now see that cities have a bigger tendency to open up your mind, whether it be from their diverse culture or its mixing up of ideas, all while providing more opportunities for leisure work, while, on the other hand, suburbs seem to have the opposite effect by being more isolated, however, leading to an easier lifestyle. So now it's up to you, the person, to choose whether you want an active city life or a more relaxed, laid back suburban lifestyle.